We're now joined by Ron Slavin, NFL agent with Sports Stars. You might recognize him as Leighton Vander Esch's agent. You've got quite a few guys with the Cowboys. You had Orlando Scandrick as well, Ron. So we're excited to get you in here because I feel like we've got a lot to cover. Specifically, Leighton Vander Esch. I know a lot of people have been concerned about that injury, the neck injury that he sustained last year. What's the latest on him?
Leighton's great. I actually just got the phone with him. He's flying back to Dallas now because people that had surgery in the offseason can be at the facility and get treatment and do the things they need to do to get ready for the season. So he was doing great. Diet plan was great, getting stronger, all those things. And then when the whole quarantine and they shut everything down, he went back to Idaho for a little bit, but now he's coming back to Dallas actually today. So he can get back with the training staff and get back to doing what he does here.
And look, we know he's an avid hunter. He grew up, his father is one of those outfitters that takes you off to go find the big bears. I saw he and his lovely wife, Maddie, have been out doing that. So I would imagine if you're able to hold a gun, that neck and that whole region up top is probably okay, right?
He says he feels better now than he's felt in his life. And I think it was always, he had some tightness in there that now that it's been fixed, he's looser and range of motion, all those things are better. I mean, he played last year, that season, trying to tackle with one arm. I know there's a lot of talk about the missed tackles, but he had a stinger early on, and then once he got landed on in that Philly game, which is just a 1 in a million deal where two people fall on you the way that they fell on him. It's just a set of circumstances that was unfortunate, but now he gets it fixed. Now he's coming into the season ready to go, and I think you're going to get an even better Leighton Vander Esch in 2020.
Ron, in terms of, we talk about Leighton Vander Esch, and he's obviously a Boise guy, and Jane referenced you've had a few Boise guys come through. I feel like you were you were probably the agent ahead of that, the Boise explosion in the NFL. I know you've repped a lot of guys there. And people talk about the Dallas-Boise connection. They kind of make jokes about it. I know one of your guys, Curtis Weaver, told us when we talked to him before the draft that was what he said to the Cowboys, that, I know we're your pipeline and things like that. What is it, do you think, about the Boise pipeline that Dallas likes so much? And I mean, just your experience with that program, with those players, what do you think it is that brings Dallas to that well so often?
Well, so I've been getting guys out of Boise since 2008. And the one thing and the reason, once I got Orlando was, he's a different personality than most because he's got the chip on his shoulder and he's angry about everything all the time. But it worked for Orlando, and it worked, as a player, and the reason he lasted as long as he did in the league because he always wanted to prove everybody wrong. And I think that's the mentality of all the Boise guys, is that I talk about this all the time, but the 2008, 9, 10, 11, 12 years at Boise, they go to Virginia Tech and beat them in the opener. They go to Georgia and Atlanta and beat them in the opener. This year they beat Florida State in the opener. So they go to these big Power 5 conference teams, always to open the season to prove a point. They win. And then the rest of the year you're trying to just keep credibility and keep your ranking up because you're playing in the Mountain West. So these players are always like, we beat these guys. We're better than these guys. But they never get the respect they get. And they feel like that when they come to the NFL too. I mean, for all the talent that they've had, very few of them gone in the first round. I mean, with Leighton going in the first round, they hadn't had somebody since Shane McClellan and Doug Martin, but they had all these really good players coming out that were going in the 2nd to 7th round. And Leighton's scenario just worked out perfect because he was the Brian Urlacher 2.0. Jane, you and I talked about it leading up to the draft that, because Marinelli was there and Will McClay and Ben Bloom all had their eyes on Leighton that whole lead up to the draft, and Leighton did everything he needed to do, went to the combine and dominated. His pro day was great. Personal meetings and visits were great. So he was the perfect storm to get picked by the Cowboys at 19. But the rest of these guys have their chip on their shoulder, so they want to prove everybody wrong for the whole time they're in the league. And I have Charles Leno, who was a 7th-round pick, and he's been the starting left tackle in Chicago for 6 years now. And got a $40 million contract. Every year, though, Charles is always saying, I have to get better. I have to prove to people that I belong. So it doesn't matter even after they get paid. They always have that chip on their shoulder because they're always told they're not good enough, or, oh, you aren't the Pac-12, or you aren't, SEC. When in reality is if you put Boise in the Pac-12, I think they'd win a lot more games than they'd lose.
Well, and you look at Leighton and a guy who was a walk-on at Boise and had to fight to even make that team and get the scholarship and everything. I think a lot of people view Leighton as just kind of a quiet guy and down to earth, small town guy. But I mean, he did have that background of being a walk on. Do you think he also has a little bit of that chip on his shoulder?
Oh, yeah,
I don't know that people look at him that way.
No, yeah, even though he went 19 overall, Leighton still wants to prove to everybody that he can be the best linebacker in the NFL. It's just not, I was a first round pick, I made it, and I'm done. He wants to prove everybody wrong. I mean, people forget too that Leighton was, the best basketball player in the state of Idaho in high school. And he went and played in these AAU tournaments, and he was playing against big time guys who were now in the NBA. And Leighton was dunking on those guys. But Leighton wasn't getting D1 offers that a lot of these guys were because he was playing for an AAU team out of Idaho. But I believe that if Leighton would have gone the basketball route, and even if we would have had a walk-on at Boise State for basketball, Leighton probably would have played in the NBA. Because the guy, 40-inch vert, 6'5", he can dunk on people, he can shoot from 25 feet all day long. I mean, his whole family's basketball players. All his sisters played college basketball. His mom was a really good basketball player. So the basketball background, too, is another reason why he's so good at football, because of the lateral movement stuff and lateral quickness. But I think no matter what Leighton would have done, he would have excelled at it. And probably, I know people are like, oh, Ron's just his agent. He's always just going to pump up his guys. But I think Jane can attest to this. I don't really BS much. I tell people what I'm really, what the truth is. And I think that if Leighton would have played basketball, he would have been in the NBA. If Leighton would have been an athlete, he would have been a Navy SEAL and probably killed Osama bin Laden. So, I mean, that's the kind of stuff that Leighton could have done.
This is why Ron is so good as an agent. My agent's pretty awesome with William Morris, but I want him to speak this highly of me when people inquire. I do want to ask you, obviously he hasn't had a lot of time with Mike Nolan in this new defense, but Mike McCarthy's saying it's going to be a 4-3 defense with 3-4 principles. How do you see Leighton fitting into this scheme now?
I think Leighton is going to have two bigger bodies in front of him that they haven't had with McCoy and Poe. So there's going to be a lot more lanes for him to run through, not just sideline to sideline in the pass defense, but he's going to be able to shoot in those gaps and make a bunch of plays. I think the game that would stick out to me the most, that would kind of the way that they played that game, was the Saints game 2 years ago, the Thursday night game, 13-10, I think the final was where Leighton was shooting the gaps, and he had a couple stops on 4th and 1 on Kamara and Ingram, and then also making plays sideline to sideline, sniffing out some of those screening passes to Kamara. So I think if fans want to know what they're going to see from Leighton and in this defense, I think that's the game where I think they schemed up the Saints that way, and I think that's what you're going to see more of with this defense.
Now, you're not just the agent for Leighton Vander Esch. I know a lot of people are now familiar with you as the agent for Aldon Smith, who a lot of Cowboys fans are really excited about. I think they kind of saw that coming out of nowhere. You, I'm sure, didn't. You were probably working things, behind the scenes for several weeks, several months leading up to it. What was it that made you confident in Aldon Smith and in that you wanted to represent him? I mean, you haven't repped him his entire time in the league. So what drew you to Aldon Smith and made you believe in him that he's ready to go?
Jay Glazer called me in December and said Aldon, has been sober since June, July. He wants to get back to football. He's been training with me at my gym. Bunch of coaches have been through here. Mike McCarthy went through there because his daughter trains there at the same gym. A bunch of different people had seen him, and then a few other people around the league that I know had called and said that they've seen Aldon, they've met with Aldon. He's in a good place. So Aldon came to Dallas, met with him here, decided that we were going to work together, and then when I went to the Combine, I had a letter that was showing that the reinstatement was going to happen, or that we were working on the reinstatement. So then a bunch of teams started calling me. Aldon wanted to go somewhere where he was comfortable. So Vic Fangio was in Denver. Pete Carroll and John Schneider had done a really nice job leading up to the draft. When Aldon came out, they didn't think Aldon was going to go 7 overall. They were going to try to maybe move up and grab Aldon. And then the 49ers took him earlier than people even expected. And then Dallas, because McCarthy and Aldon had hit it off pretty well when they had met. And then Jim Tomsula was his coach in San Francisco, so he had a relationship there. And then Jay and the Jones family is pretty tight. So there's just a lot of different pieces that fit. I didn't want to make the decision for Aldon just because I live in Dallas. I didn't want, him saying, oh, Ron's just pushing the Cowboys, because Ron has a bunch of guys in the Cowboys now. I wanted Alden to make the decision for himself. So as the season went on, no matter what happened, everything doesn't work out all the time, right? I mean, there's a reason guys only last in this league for 3.5 years. So I wanted to make sure that he felt comfortable with it. And then once we went through the whole process and talked to the teams, he called me and was like, it was March 30th, I think. And he's like, I know that Dallas is the place I want to be. So we worked out the contract, and then I know Jay put it out on a show on April 1st, and people were like, is this April Fool's? Alden Smith's really going to be a Cowboy, but it was real. And Alden's here in Dallas. He flew in on Friday, and he's working out and just staying ready for hopefully a reinstatement that happens sooner than later.
Why should fans and the Cowboys feel comfortable with Alden coming back?
I think there's probably a lot of fans out there that have had either substance abuse problems or family members that had substance abuse problems, and you just have to have faith that the person is going to, at some point in their life, figure it out that, do I want to, drink myself to death, or, we have a major opioid problem in this country. Do I want to kill myself with those things, or do we want to get our life in order and straight? And I think Alden's in a really good spot. And, alcohol has been Alden's problem, and he knows that that's the problem. I think he recognizes that, he's like, I always was blaming everybody else, but it was on me, and I can't always play the victim. So once he said he figured that out, he's been in a really good place. He said he's happier than he's ever been. And I mean, every time I'm around him, I see more and more cool things about Alden. And he's in incredible shape. When he got off the plane the other day, I was like, oh my God, like this, if he is the player he was last time he was on the field, and he's this much bigger and stronger, I fear for NFL quarterbacks.
The Cowboys have been known to take on players with, questionable issues in their past, or basically, they're willing to believe in guys and in the redemption. As Jerry told Jane near the end of last year that he believes in redemption. He's a comeback story guy. And because of that, when they've had some of these guys come onto the team before, it's been typical of the Cowboys that they'll set them up with some sort of accountability system or accountability partner, somebody's designated for that. Is anything like that in place for Alden that the Cowboys have talked about, or are they just comfortable with him coming in here and operating on his own?
I admire the Jones family for giving people second chances. Fans turn on players too quick. I feel like people make mistakes. A lot of fans sitting at home have made mistakes. Nobody's perfect. And I admire the Joneses for giving a lot of these guys second chances that a lot of teams wouldn't. I think with Alden, the reason we had so much interest, because everybody knew Alden was a good person. He wasn't out there doing a lot of the things that were said about him. It was just the alcohol was killing him. And they recognize that, and they know that, if he has the right people around him, he's going to be okay. To answer the second part of your question is, myself, because I'm a control freak, is going to manage the situation. They haven't been perfect here. No team is perfect with the people they surround them with. Unfortunately, when you have people with problems, there's other people that come out of the woodwork that all of a sudden are experts, or they want to be they think they can solve those problems. Well, if you're not a real expert, just stay away from my client. So I'm going to handle it. We have Alden's support system around him. It's a very small circle, and I think that's the way we're going to be successful.
Speaking of being successful, you have obviously done a couple of contracts with the Cowboys as an agent. Dak Prescott, a contract I think a lot of us thought were going to get done last summer, still hasn't gotten done. And then the signing of Andy Dalton. Talk to me about the art of the deal as it pertains to the Cowboys. Obviously, this is like me asking you to diagnose a patient that you haven't seen the x-rays and actually gone in there and done the blood work. But as somebody on the outside, do you think that this deal gets done, and what's it going to take for it to get done?
First, I don't think the sign of Andy Dalton has any effect on Dak Prescott. How many times do we see teams, their starting quarterback gets hurt and then the season's over because they don't have somebody capable backing up? No disrespect to Cooper Rush, but Andy Dalton is a proven NFL quarterback. They got him on a very low number. His family's here in Dallas. I think it makes a lot of sense because of the quarantine and because of things that are going on. He spends time with his family. He's in Dallas. The minute the training camp opens up, whether it's the end of July, middle of August, whenever things start back up, he can drive over to the Star and get to work. So that part of it makes a lot of sense for Andy. I don't think it has any effect on Dak because Dak's the starting quarterback and Dak's number should be Dak's number.
Looking back at just circling back to Leighton, I'm curious because I don't know that people ever know this sort of aspect of Leighton and who he is as a player and as a person. I know the Cowboys, there was some talk last year at the end of last year that some people were like, did the Cowboys get the leadership that they needed on defense? Was there somebody there that was, the driving force? And with Leighton being out there for that last half of the season when that stuff started turning up, do you think Leighton is somebody that can step in the season and supply some of that and kind of step into that role?
Definitely. I mean, Leighton always talked about year 3 being the year where, it was where he was comfortable enough in the locker room, being around the people long enough where that leadership role can take effect. I think that Leighton is in a good place now. He's earned the respect of his teammates, the way he works, the way he handles himself. I think this is a year where Leighton should, step up and become the leader that I'm sure the Cowboys would love him to be.
He reminds me so much of Sean Lee, Bobby, Ron. Every time I see the way that he approaches film, the way that he carries himself. So that's good news in the fact that you've got Sean Lee back yet another year, especially if we're looking at seeing more of these 3-4 sets, just needing some extra linebackers. It certainly looks like they've started to improve this team, something that I didn't feel was necessarily addressed. Ron, thank you so much for your time. I love that you're a no BS guy. You're the best, Ron. Thank you so much for joining the show. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you.